What if one of the most respected World War II movies secretly broke every Hollywood rule? Behind the polished uniforms, the roaring aircraft, and the heroic speeches, The Eagle Has Landed hid a storm of chaos. From feuds and politics to near-death stunts and moral controversy. Tonight, we dive deep into 20 shocking secrets behind the 1976 classic that dared to make audiences root for the enemy. The director's swan song. John Sturges was a name that carried weight in mid-century Hollywood. He had crafted some of the most iconic masculine adventures of American cinema: Bad Day at Black Rock, 1955, The Magnificent Seven, 1960, and The Great Escape, 1963. His style was unmistakable. Widescreen compositions, clean storytelling, and characters who defined themselves by quiet bravery. But by the mid-1970s, the Hollywood that Sturges once ruled had changed. The studios were run by younger executives, chasing counterculture energy, not traditional heroism. Sturges, proud and old school, was growing tired of that new world. When he accepted The Eagle Has Landed, it was meant to be a return to the large-scale adventure film that he did best, a war thriller with moral shadows, suspense, and spectacle. Yet those who worked on set said Sturges approached the film more like a man fulfilling an obligation than one chasing inspiration. Assistant directors described him as courteous but remote, often sitting in his chair with his coffee thermos, staring out past the lights after a take instead of giving direction. Crew members remembered a sense of quiet resignation. Between setups, he rarely spoke, sometimes wandering off to the edge of the location, watching the clouds roll in over Oxfordshire. One cameraman later said, "He directed like a man already gone fishing." That detachment bled into the rhythm of the film itself. The Eagle Has Landed moves with a kind of measured calm, every shot deliberate, every movement precise, yet carrying a melancholy weight. The soldiers in the story fight a doomed mission. Their determination is stoic, their end inevitable. It mirrors Sturges's own mood, a filmmaker finishing one last campaign knowing it would be his final one. On set, the younger cast and crew, Michael Caine, Donald Sutherland, Jenny Agutter, sensed that they were working under a master nearing his goodbye. There was reverence, but also a distance, as though everyone understood they were witnessing the closing of a chapter. Sturges wasn't a man to announce his retirement or stage a farewell interview. When the final shot was completed, he shook hands, offered his thanks, and quietly left the set. There was no wrap party. After post-production ended, Sturges disappeared from the Hollywood scene. He settled into a life of near seclusion, sailing and fishing off the California coast. He never directed again, never returned for nostalgia or revival projects. In that silence, The Eagle Has Landed took on an unintended symbolism. What appeared to be another war adventure became, in hindsight, a cinematic farewell letter, a story about discipline, futility, and dignity in retreat. Every frame seems to carry that awareness. The pacing feels reflective rather than explosive. The violence comes in brief, tragic bursts. The camera lingers on faces marked by fatigue. It is as if Sturges was leaving behind a meditation on endings of missions, of men, of eras. The Eagle Has Landed wasn't just the conclusion of a movie. It was the final salute of a craftsman who chose to step away with grace rather than fade into irrelevance. When the credits rolled for audiences in 1976, few realized they had just watched John Sturges's last film. Only later did critics and historians look back and see it for what it truly was. Not only a thriller about honor and defeat, but a mirror of its own maker, a director staging his final escape from Hollywood, quietly, without fanfare, letting the camera close on his legacy. ND, stick around till the end, because the bonus fact reveals how this movie quietly ended the career of one of Hollywood's greatest directors. Casting chaos and political backlash. The casting of The Eagle Has Landed was as turbulent as its storyline. What began as a straightforward World War II thriller soon became a battleground of politics, ego, and global sensitivities. The script's premise, German paratroopers on a mission to kidnap Winston Churchill, was already controversial. But when it came time to cast the key roles, real-world ideologies collided with fiction in ways that nearly derailed the entire production. Originally, the Irish character Liam Devlin was written for Richard Harris. Harris, charismatic and intense, seemed a perfect fit for the rogue spy with ambiguous loyalties. However, Harris's open support for the Irish Republican Army during the height of the Troubles made headlines and enemies. As news spread that he would play a character sympathetic to the IRA, the production received threats. Investors grew nervous. The studio, fearing public outrage, quietly pushed him out. The role went instead to Donald Sutherland, whose easy charm masked a more complex, detached energy. Sutherland brought something new to Devlin. Where Harris might have played him as fiery and ideological, Sutherland made him sly, introspective, and oddly romantic. A man who flirts with danger and ideology alike, but remains at heart a survivor. His Irishness became less political and more personal. It softened the film's controversy, while adding psychological depth. Yet the decision also left behind a trace of what might have been, a film that openly courted political discomfort. Meanwhile, another major casting switch reshaped the film's emotional center. Michael Caine was first offered the role of Liam Devlin, but after reading the script, he declined. He asked instead to play Colonel Kurt Steiner, the German officer leading the mission. Caine's reasoning was sharp. Steiner was the film's moral axis, a man bound by honor rather than ideology. By choosing Steiner, Caine transformed the film's structure. The hero was no longer a British or Allied figure, but a weary German soldier, a decision that unsettled both audiences and financiers. The result was a war film that refused to play by the old moral rules. The Germans were not faceless villains. They were human beings, caught in an impossible task. Steiner's quiet nobility, Devlin's wry fatalism, and the blurred lines between right and wrong made The Eagle Has Landed stand apart from the patriotic war films of earlier decades. Some critics hailed it as bold. Then they heard described Devlin, mating. Others accused it of moral confusion. Behind the scenes, the political tension was just as palpable. Studio executives worried about the optics of sympathetic Nazis. British Veterans Associations voiced discomfort with the film's portrayal of German soldiers as disciplined and decent. In response, marketing materials were altered. Posters emphasized the Allied resistance rather than the German mission, shifting the narrative from German paratroopers infiltrate England to a daring Allied counterstrike. It was a careful rebranding meant to calm controversy without changing a frame of the film itself. Yet that ambiguity became one of the film's greatest strengths. Caine's portrayal of Steiner turned the enemy into a tragic figure, an honorable man trapped in a dishonorable system. His soft-spoken restraint, his loyalty to duty rather than ideology, and his quiet sorrow for the futility of war gave the movie an emotional complexity rare in the genre. Donald Sutherland's Devlin, meanwhile, served as the film's conscience and its Joker, a man who navigates between politics and personal survival. Neither hero nor villain, but something more unsettling. A realist. Together, Caine and Sutherland created a strange magnetic chemistry. Two men from opposing sides who shared the same disillusionment with war itself. By the time filming began, the tension of the casting process had infused the production. Actors carried it with them into every scene. You can sense it in the film's tone. Uneasy, cynical, but oddly romantic about loyalty and sacrifice. The Eagle Has Landed became not just a war story, but a reflection of its time, a film caught between old Hollywood heroism and the murky politics of the 1970 seconds. What began as a casting crisis ended up shaping the entire film's identity. The substitutions, the controversies, and the reluctant compromises gave birth to something unplanned. A war movie that questioned the very nature of sides, symbols, and duty. And in that blurred morality, it found its strange power, a film where the uniform doesn't define the man and where history itself feels just one rewrite away from fiction. Real locations playing pretend. The Eagle Has Landed sold the illusion of wartime Europe with remarkable authenticity, but almost none of what audiences saw on screen was filmed where the story supposedly took place. Beneath its realism lay a web of cinematic deceit, a logistical puzzle of locations stitched together across 3 countries. Each scene that appeared seamless on screen was, in truth, an elaborate illusion built through improvisation, compromise, and weather-worn patience. The fictional English village of Studley Constable, where most of the story unfolds, was entirely created in the small, picturesque hamlet of Maple Durham in Oxfordshire. Chosen for its timeless look, stone cottages, narrow lanes, and a centuries-old watermill, Maple Durham became a full-scale movie set for months in 1975. The crew built bridges, modified the churchyard, and even constructed a functional wooden water wheel for the pivotal pond sequence. Locals were astonished by the transformation. Overnight, their quiet riverside community turned into a German-occupied village, complete with Nazi banners, sandbags, and military trucks rumbling through fields. But the illusion extended far beyond England. For scenes meant to represent the German-occupied Channel Islands, the production traveled to Cornwall. Its rocky coastlines and overcast skies doubled as northern France. In Finland, a train station in the town of Turku stood in for wartime Poland's snowy platforms. Soldiers in heavy coats and locomotives belching steam created a convincing Eastern European tableau. Each location brought its own challenges: language barriers, unpredictable weather, and local extras who didn't always understand English instructions. The production's patchwork approach became a logistical feat. One week, cast and crew were trudging through muddy English lanes. The next, they were filming parachute jumps with British Army specialists on Finnish airfields. To maintain visual continuity, cinematographers meticulously tracked the direction of sunlight, the color of soil, even the shape of local trees. A scene that begins in Oxfordshire might end, mid-shot, in a Finnish snowbank. Yet on screen, the transitions appear effortless. One of the most striking examples of this illusion came in the parachute drop sequence. The Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers Parachute Display Team, real British paratroopers, were hired to perform the jumps. Their precision was too good. Every landing looked too perfect, too rehearsed. Director John Sturges, seeking chaos and authenticity, ordered them to land worse. The soldiers had to deliberately misstep, roll awkwardly, or stumble through mud to simulate the confusion of combat. Ironically, this deliberate imperfection became one of the film's most convincing details. Even the scenic beauty of Maple Durham hid countless improvisations. Rainfall delayed key sequences for days. Sets had to be rebuilt after storms. The artificial bridge constructed for the film began to sink under the weight of military vehicles and had to be reinforced with hidden steel supports. Yet through all of this, the production persisted, driven by Sturges's meticulous eye for visual truth. For the villagers of Maple Durham, the filming became an unforgettable chapter of local folklore. Children watched from behind hedgerows as extras in German uniforms marched past their homes. Pubs were filled with film crews and technicians discussing gunfire choreography over pints of ale. When filming ended, several props, fake grenades, helmets, and spent cartridges were accidentally left behind. Years later, locals still found them buried in gardens and attics, relics of a movie that had briefly turned their home into occupied Europe. To this day, Maple Durham remains a living museum of that transformation. Tourists visit to trace the film's geography: the watermill pond where the young girl falls, the lane where the convoy crashes, the churchyard where Steiner makes his last stand. Time has weathered the stone walls, but the ghosts of 1976 still linger. Behind the seamless illusion of the eagle has landed lies the unglamorous truth of filmmaking: endless travel, weather frustrations, and the constant dance between authenticity and invention. Every field, bridge, and pond in the movie tells a quiet story of compromise, where England became Germany, Finland became Poland, and the past became real again, if only for the length of a shot. In the end, that patchwork geography mirrored the story itself, a tale about deception, disguise, and the fragility of appearances. What audiences saw as history reborn was, in fact, cinema's greatest trick: reality rewritten, one location at a time. A novel that turned into a movie overnight. Before the cameras ever rolled, The Eagle Has Landed was already a phenomenon in print, a bestseller that caught Hollywood's attention with lightning speed. The film's strange, breathless urgency wasn't a coincidence. It came directly from the pace at which Jack Higgins' novel leapt from bookstore shelves to movie screens. What normally takes years in the film industry happened here in a matter of months, giving the entire production an energy that felt improvised, immediate, and slightly reckless. Jack Higgins, real name Harry Patterson, was already a prolific author by the mid-1970s, known for his taut thrillers about espionage, betrayal, and impossible missions. But when he published The Eagle Has Landed in 1975, something extraordinary happened. The book wasn't just a hit, it was a sensation. Readers devoured it. The premise was irresistible. What if, during World War II, a team of German paratroopers attempted to kidnap Winston Churchill? It was alternate history mixed with gritty realism, blending the tension of a spy novel with the sweep of a war epic. Even before the book officially hit shelves, Hollywood had taken notice. Paramount Pictures executives and producer Jack Weiner moved fast, so fast in fact, that they bought the film rights in late 1974 before most readers had even seen a copy. They knew they had a blockbuster idea on their hands, one that combined historical what-if intrigue with large-scale action. Within weeks, screenwriter Tom Mankiewicz, best known for his work on the James Bond films, was hired to adapt the novel. This speed was almost unheard of in the industry. Normally, a best-selling novel spends years in development hell. Scripts are rewritten, directors change, and studios hesitate. But The Eagle Has Landed defied that pattern. It moved from manuscript to camera in barely a year. The reason was simple. The world was ready for morally complex war stories. The optimism of early post-war films had faded. The Vietnam era had left audiences skeptical of clear-cut heroism. Higgins' book tapped into that mood perfectly. Its villains weren't entirely villainous, and its heroes weren't flawless. The adaptation process, however, mirrored the book's own intensity. Tom Mankiewicz streamlined the plot, but kept the novel's tension intact. He once called it the best script I ever wrote, but admitted frustration at how fast everything moved. There was little time for polish. He wanted to capture the spirit of Higgins' story, a mission doomed from the start, filled with strange humanity and fatal choices. But speed came at a cost. Scenes were drafted, revised, and approved within days. Dialogue was sometimes rewritten on set. When the cameras rolled in 1975, the film still carried that breathless urgency. The story unfolds like a military operation planned overnight, precise yet slightly chaotic. You can feel it in the pacing. One scene races into the next, mirroring the sense of a plan that might fall apart at any moment. Even the actors seemed caught in that momentum. Michael Caine, Donald Sutherland, and Robert Duvall all joined the project within weeks of each other, with minimal rehearsal time. The result was raw, immediate, and oddly authentic characters making decisions on instinct, just as soldiers in the story do. Jack Higgins himself was both amused and astonished by how fast Hollywood moved. In interviews, he later admitted that the film's energy reflected the very conditions of its birth. It wasn't a polished epic, it was an urgent, improvised leap from imagination to cinema. And that urgency, paradoxically, became its strength. The film's release only deepened the legend. Viewers sensed something different in its tone. It wasn't romanticized war. It was war as tension, confusion, and moral grayness. The speed of its creation had stripped away overthinking, leaving behind something lean and instinctive. The Eagle Has Landed arrived in theaters less than 2 years after the novel's publication, a record-breaking turnaround for a film of its scale and complexity. In the end, that haste gave it character. Like the soldiers in its story, the filmmakers were racing against time, improvising under pressure, and surviving through discipline and luck. The urgency of its making became part of its DNA, a film that, much like its fictional mission, shouldn't have worked as well as it did. But it did. The Eagle Has Landed remains a testament to cinematic momentum, proof that sometimes creative fire burns brightest when the clock is ticking and no one stops long enough to doubt the plan. Nazi soldiers with sympathy. The moral tightrope. In the world of 1,970 seconds, cinema Portraying Nazi soldiers as anything more than one-dimensional villains was an audacious gamble. Yet The Eagle Has Landed chose to do exactly that. Instead of treating its German characters as faceless enemies, it dared to give them depth, conscience, and even fragments of humanity. It was a war film that refused to conform, one that blurred the moral lines so thoroughly that audiences found themselves rooting for the very men history had taught them to hate. At the heart of this daring experiment was Colonel Kurt Steiner, played by Michael Caine. Steiner isn't depicted as a Nazi ideologue or a glory-seeking officer. He's a professional soldier, bound by a code of honor rather than fanaticism. When he and his men are chosen for the secret mission to kidnap Winston Churchill, they accept not out of hatred or ideology, but out of discipline, a soldier's instinct to follow orders, even when he knows they make little sense. In an early draft of the screenplay, Steiner's humanity was subtle. But Caine pushed for more. Having grown up in post-war Britain and having served briefly in the army himself, he was deeply aware of what the uniform represented. He reportedly told director John Sturges, "If I'm going to wear that uniform, I want to show there's a man under it." Caine refused to play Steiner as a caricature. He insisted that the costume department dull the insignia on his tunic, age the fabric, and avoid close-ups of the swastika armband. He wanted Steiner to look like a soldier tired of ideology, not proud of it. That decision altered the film's tone completely. Suddenly, the story wasn't about Nazis versus Allies. It was about human beings trapped in systems larger than themselves. Steiner's quiet decency, his small acts of compassion, his reluctance to kill, his loyalty to his men made him an unsettlingly sympathetic figure. When he rescues a young Jewish girl in a brief, almost wordless scene, the gesture rewrites the audience's moral expectations. You're not supposed to feel empathy for a man in that uniform, but you do. The screenwriter Tom Mankiewicz later said that this tension was deliberate. He wanted to test whether an audience could still feel compassion when every symbol around the character screamed enemy. It was a risk that divided critics. Some praised it as bold, calling it a war film for the post-Vietnam generation, a story that understood that moral clarity is often an illusion. Others condemned it, arguing that humanizing German soldiers blurred the line between understanding and forgiveness. Donald Sutherland's Liam Devlin only deepened that moral complexity. Devlin, an Irish revolutionary working with the Germans, embodied ambiguity itself, neither villain nor hero, neither loyal nor treacherous. His charm, wit, and philosophical detachment gave the film its conscience. In his exchanges with Steiner, two men from different worlds discover a shared disillusionment. Both serve causes they no longer believe in. Both know that their mission is doomed. This interplay between Steiner and Devlin forms the movie's emotional core. Their conversations filled with dry humor, quiet fatalism, and flashes of compassion turn the film into something more than an action thriller. It becomes a meditation on duty and morality. The enemy, it suggests, is not just the man across the battlefield, but the machinery of ideology itself. In 1976, this was radical. Audiences were used to war films that divided the world neatly into good and evil. The Eagle Has Landed did the opposite. It asked viewers to question why they cheered for one uniform over another. It asked whether honor could survive inside a corrupt cause. It blurred lines that had remained untouchable for decades. That moral daring gave the movie its strange power. You realize somewhere halfway through that you're not watching villains. You're watching men caught between conscience and command, soldiers trying to remain human in the machinery of war. By the time Steiner meets his end, the audience feels not satisfaction, but sorrow. It's that discomfort that keeps The Eagle Has Landed alive long after its release. It isn't simply a war movie, it's a mirror held up to the moral confusion of warfare itself. A story where the enemy looks back at you, weary and familiar, and for a moment, you understand him. A fake water wheel, a real disaster when accidents became art. Every great film hides a few happy accidents, but in The Eagle Has Landed, one near disaster didn't just make it into the final cut. It redefined an entire sequence. and deepened the story. What looked on screen like a tense, perfectly staged wartime incident was, in truth, a chaotic mistake captured on film and cleverly rewritten into the plot. The scene was meant to be simple. A young village girl falls into the pond beside the watermill, prompting a dramatic rescue by one of the undercover German paratroopers disguised as Polish soldiers. It's the moment the villagers begin to suspect that something isn't quite right about their guests, a small slip that sets the entire story in motion. To stage it, the production built a full-scale, working water wheel at the Mapledura Mill, carefully engineered for safety. But on the day of filming, safety nearly failed. The stuntman playing the rescuer leapt into the water, only for his parachute rig used to simulate the jump's momentum to snag on the machinery beneath the surface. As he struggled, his uniform tore, revealing a hidden German tunic beneath the civilian clothes. The cameras caught it all. The director yelled, "Cut!" But John Sturges, after watching playback, made a decision that stunned the crew. He said, "Keep it." Quote, 2000. Clip ban. Created. Clip ban quote. 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 That one accidental reveal became the turning point of the film. What was supposed to be an innocent rescue suddenly exposed the infiltrators' true identity. The tension that follows villagers whispering, faces tightening, the uneasy calm breaking grew naturally from that moment of improvisation, a mistake turned into the film's narrative heartbeat. Behind the scenes, however, it was chaos. The water wheel had to be rebuilt after the accident bent its supports. The pond was drained, repaired, and refilled with pumps overnight. Local villagers came to watch the commotion, gossip spreading that someone had almost drowned on set. The crew joked grimly that the movie's realism was one takeaway from tragedy. Yet from that near disaster came one of the Eagle Has Landed's most memorable textures. The sense that anything could go wrong, that danger was always one breath away. Sturges, ever the old-school craftsman, believed in using imperfection to his advantage. "War isn't neat," he reportedly told the editor. "Neither is filmmaking." It was an attitude that shaped the rest of the shoot. Sturges began embracing unplanned moments, a misplaced salute, a stumble, a line flubbed and saved by reaction. The film's rhythm grew looser, more alive, like history unfolding instead of being recreated. That philosophy carried through to the final edit. The water wheel scene, raw and unscripted, now stands as a symbol of what made The Eagle Has Landed unique. A polished production born out of unpredictability. A story about order and chaos, made by a crew living both. By the time the film wrapped, the fake wheel had rotted in the pond, half submerged, left behind like a relic of its own fiction. Locals said it creaked in the wind for years, a ghost of cinema echoing in the English countryside. When The Eagle Has Landed finally premiered, audiences had no idea that its most pivotal moment was born from an accident. They saw it as careful storytelling, not the split-second choice of a director turning panic into poetry. And that's the strange magic of the film. A reminder that history, even when faked, is built on real chance. One wrong move, one torn costume, one decision to keep the camera rolling, and suddenly, a routine war picture becomes something unforgettable. In the end, the water wheel didn't just spin the story forward. It captured the essence of the entire production. A film built on precision and chaos, luck and discipline, illusion and truth. Proof that sometimes, the greatest moments in cinema aren't written at all. From barking dogs to near-fatal stunts, from real soldiers to broken politics. The Eagle Has Landed wasn't just made, it was survived. If you love uncovering the wild secrets of classic Hollywood, hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the next film's truth might be even stranger than fiction.